Welcome, Christina, to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
Me
Thank you for
too.
having me.
Yes. I want to get into all the things with you, but first we always kind of jump on a note of reflection, something motivational, maybe inspirational, maybe just so let's get your thoughts on this. It says, every time you find some humor in a difficult situation, you win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. For
Are you
sure.
good
For
at
sure.
finding humor in all this
Uh,
messy caregiving and
yeah.
care entrepreneurship?
Yes, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. I mean, you have to. I mean, it's kind of like what is that? I don't know if you remember that movie with Jim Carrey, Liar Liar, where he's like, what else could go wrong? You know what I mean? What else could go wrong? And
Yes.
so it's kind of like that. And caregiving is so wonderful because it really prepares you for the sky to be falling. And you're like, all right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost comical, the stuff that happens. So
You can't
you
make
just,
it up.
no, you literally can't make it up. So, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So finding the humor, I think, is something that we have to try to seek and be intentional about to just as a coping mechanism.
oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So amen to that. Okay. Well,
Hmm.
you're Christina, like we've known each other for a while, but your burnout story has really made a lasting impact on me. Like it's probably I heard it the first time when we did an Instagram live together, or maybe that wasn't even the first time, but we dug into it. And we often talk about the impacts of caregiver burnout, and death can certainly be one of them, but you almost died. You
Yeah,
almost died, but
yeah,
you lived to tell it, you clawed your way back. And so
right.
I love that it's not only the impactful caregiver burnout story, but it's the I clawed my way back and I'm here to tell you about it story. But for those who
Yeah.
have not heard it, share with us a little bit about what was going on and how caregiving kind of just erupted into your life.
Okay. Yeah. So my mom had the stroke in 2013. It was March 16th of 2013. I was in tech. I didn't know anything about the healthcare industry. I sold servers and hardwares and software, you know what I mean? And I was with my boyfriend and we were on three softball teams. I had a cat. I didn't have any children. I hated the sight of blood and needles. Like I hospitals, doctors, no, I'd rather get a massage and take a vacation. That was, sun and beach was my, medicine. And because I could afford that then. And so when my mom had her stroke and I walked in, they gave her like 1% chance to live. And she was paralyzed from the neck down and for 30 days. And she stayed in that hospital for, I think it was a couple months and then rehab a couple months. But I lived in the hospital with her. When I say lived, it was like, out of that suitcase, sleeping in that hospital chair that we've all slept in, right? And going home once a week to take a shower because she was in Seattle and I was in Vancouver. It's almost 3 hours away. And anyways, so I was thrown into caregiving. I was asking all these questions, of course, of the hospital, of the medical staff. What do I do? How do I do this when I take her home? And I wheeled her out of there thinking she had insurance. And, the hospital, the doctors and nurses and, caseworkers are really there to do their thing. They don't give resources. That's not their specialty, and, so I wheel mom out of there thinking we're going to be great because I'm making over 100 grand and in 2013 and she was a manufacturing engineer, an aerospace engineer, and she had a really great pension and she had really great insurance. She had Medicare plus a supplement. We're good. We're golden. I get home, insurance isn't covered by that, and so we've got to figure out how to pay that. And anyways, and I've got to figure out now, all of a sudden, I went from being a career woman to the second I walked her out, that I wheeled her out those doors, I became a PT, an OT, a speech therapist, a nurse, a medical assistant, a case manager, a med tech. You know what I mean? I became all of those and I had no training, and so I was trying to do all those things. And then mom was having more complications, seizures and all of these things. Well, and I'm trying to work full time because I'm paying for some of her care, at this
Yeah.
time. And 3 years in, I have to leave my job. It was February 2017. So I guess that's, 3, 4 years in. And by this time I am like sleeping 5 to 10 hours a week, you know,
A week.
um, a
Yeah,
week,
she
a
didn't
week.
goof on that. Yeah.
Yeah, a week. And I have gained 100 pounds, right, from March 16th of 2013 to February of 2017. Um, and I don't know, I got ready for work, but I think, I stopped looking in the mirror the second, I became a caregiver. And honestly, I didn't even know I was a caregiver, I mean, at first, I wasn't even a caregiver. I wasn't even a daughter taking care of her mom. I was literally a daughter afraid her mom was going to die. That's what I was at first. And I remember I had a Facebook memory that came up when I first brought mom home, and it was like, hey, does anybody know if they have such thing as like babysitters, but for adults? I literally didn't, I was so out of touch with all of this that I didn't even know there was such things as caregivers for
Yeah.
adults.
Home
Right. And
care.
so,
Yeah.
right. And so, anyways, so it was February of 2017. I had used all my vacation time. I had used all my sick time for the year already in 2 months, just taking
Wow.
mom to doctor's appointments and hospital visits. And so I gave a month's notice, and I had to leave my job. I thought I was going to take a leave of absence, and I went to my last doctor's appointment before I lost my insurance. And the doctor said, well, now you've got high blood pressure, you've got diabetes, your body is literally shutting down. That's when I found out I'd gained 100 pounds because I didn't know. Right. I didn't know. I just knew that like my clothes weren't fitting. I had to get new clothes, and they said, we'd be surprised if you lived even 6 months, if that. And so, I
How did
and
you
the
process
stress.
that? Like what
I
was
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'll be 100% honest. Like my mind, in my mind, like the first thing I thought was like, finally, I there's a way out, and I was
oh,
not suicidal. I was not suicidal by any means, but I couldn't deal with the stress. I constantly, because mom wasn't getting better, of course. I felt like I was failing. I wasn't sleeping. I just lost my, fancy career. What was I going to do? And I wasn't killing myself. I wasn't doing anything. So it's like my body just gave out. So it was fair, you know what I mean? So it's like, um, that was my first thought, like,
mm,
finally, and then my second thought was like, okay, who's going to take care of mom? And then my next thought was, this can't be the end of the story. I have not gone through all of this to make this be the end of the story. And it's
mhm.
got to have a better ending. It's like, I don't know if you've ever watched a really crappy movie and you sit through the whole movie and then you get to and you only stay in the theater because there's got to be a good ending,
Yeah, you're
right?
like, "Oh, there's at least the something, the outtakes, there's
Right,
an
right,
epilogue.
right.
I'll wait for it."
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so that's what I was there's got to be a different ending is what, I thought. And so, then, everybody had talked about self-care. And you know how it is when you're a caregiver and they talk about self-care, it's like you
Yeah,
just
you
want to.
should take care of yourself, Christina.
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, I have no time. I have no money because what we do, we compare it to what self care was before we became a caregiver. The vacations we could take, the massages we could get, the mani
Mhm.
pedis, the time we had. I didn't have time,
Yeah,
money,
you're like,
or
"That I don't have time for that."
yeah, or even if somebody gave me respite and somebody gave me a gift certificate for a massage, there's no way I could have even relaxed on that massage table. And so
Mm.
I had to, my first act of self-care was literally taking a blood pressure pill and texting a friend that I had taken that pill for 30 days. That was it. And my body was, not only had I gained that 100 pounds, but my body was so heavy with grief and fatigue and just trauma, and depression. that I really couldn't exercise. I couldn't afford a gym. I couldn't afford. So what I had to do for my first act of exercise to start to lose weight was when I would walk down the hall, I would have to reach my arms up to the I committed to that. I committed to that,
You're like, I'm
and
already walking. I'm just going to raise
right,
my hands
right,
up.
right. And that's literally all I could do because it was everything was painful in my life, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, it was all it was I constantly felt like I was failing. It's not easy for us caregivers to watch the person we care for slowly decline, and I remember one time somebody said to me, Christina, your mom has a God and you're not it. And I was like, yeah, yeah, that exactly. That was my thought. Like, well, I know that, but I was so like holding on to her so tight. Like I
Like a savior complex almost.
it
Like,
was almost like it's like it was life and death if she drank her protein shake or not to me. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Like my day depended on, did she drink her protein shake? Did she take her medications? Did she get changed this amount of times a day? You know what I mean?
Like
Like
a
and
codependency, really.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like I couldn't I would just obsess about that. You know what I mean? And it's like it was like my responsibility, and really, she really, if she didn't drink that protein shake or take all of her meds that particular day, like that eh, really,
How did you recover from that? Like, because I'm sure there's people listening that are like, oh, this sounds like me. Like I'm living for somebody else and helping them do all the things. And then I'm like moving further, further away from healthy and happy.
well,
Like
I'll tell you,
mentally, like you talked about the physical things, like taking the supplements and the arms and stuff, but like mentally, like how did you say, like, wake up,
and
Christina?
yeah, enough's enough. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, those little acts of self-care added up, right?
Good.
And 30 seconds turned into 1 minute, turned into 5 minutes, turned into 15. And what I learned later was all those times that I said, you don't understand, I don't have time. I did have time. What was happening? There was a lot of time in my day as a caregiver that I wasn't physically doing something, but I was mentally in my head going over, okay, what if this happens? What if this happens? And I should have done this and I should
Mm,
have done that. Is mom okay? I should probably check on mom. I don't have time for this. In our heads, we're going a million miles an hour, right? And so I just traded in some of that obsessive time for self-care time, right? And
yeah.
it created a lot of time, right? And so I remember, like, my mom, I know a lot of people have family members that they take care of, and sometimes those people aren't as nice, on certain days, right?
Hmm.
Especially if there's a role reversal or whatever. And it was this one day that mom kicked me out. I don't know, because it was Tuesday, and I don't know, there was a sandwich that had, turkey instead of ham, something simple like that, right?
Yeah.
And so and I remember, I couldn't really stay there and argue with her because her blood pressure would go up. It wasn't like, it wasn't productive, right? And I remembered what my friend said, like, you're not her God. Like, she's got a God to watch over her. Like, you were not going to be able to save her life. Like, the God says when she's going to go. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And if you're listening and God's not your deal, it doesn't matter if it's God, Buddha, Larry from the convenience store, whatever your thing is, right? But and so I remember I left, and I pulled my car like down the street, like, and I just sat in my car and I like cried and said, she's got a God, she's got a God, she's got a God. And it's like I'm not the one who's supposed to keep her and it was, and I had to do that multiple times. And it's almost like, remember that when you first started caring for your loved one, and then um, they said they didn't want anybody else to care for them. They only wanted you. I mean, everybody went through that, right? Nobody, I've never come across a caregiving situation where the person that you're caring for said, "Hey, why don't we bring in some other outside people to care for me?" Like, I've never heard. I think that would be very great rather than having you here, right? And so remember that when you first like let go and had them come in, I mean, um, it just I had to like do that. You know what I mean? I had to have that moment of like letting go. And it
And yet
was
you're
very,
financially challenged too at this
oh
point.
my
So like,
God. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you go from making like $100,000 a year, I had to leave my career, right? And I was paying 1,500 to $3,000 a month for my mom's care. So imagine you're budgeting, you're doing whatever, and then all of a sudden somebody says, "Listen, we're starting today out of nowhere. You've got 1,500, $3,000 worth of expenses per month, right?" And so, and then I left my job and I had to take a part-time job making $15 an hour after making $100,000. And I still had to pay to work that job. I still had to pay 1,500 to $3,000 a month. Right.
right,
And so I had to figure out how to do that. Right. So what that became is I had to take multiple part-time jobs. I also had to like give blood. Now I'm deathly afraid of needles. Right. But I'm having to give plasma. I'm having to sell all the things that I've acquired, my nice clothes, my nice shoes, like all of these things. All of those things were being sold. Like people talk about like living paycheck to paycheck. I was literally living day to day. My mom would say, "How are you going to pay your rent?" Because the caregivers that I hired came first, because if you have a good caregiver, you cannot afford to lose them, right? And so I literally, and then I remember, when you're 2017, $100,000 a year was good. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I mean, it's pretty decent today, even, right?
hmm,
So I had never even walked into a food bank in my life. Those were places that I donated to. And I remember the first time I had to go to a food bank. It was, it was, another one of those moments that I was grateful, but I had to sit in my car and cry afterwards. And then I would have like maybe $36 to go actual grocery shopping for like meats and stuff. And I would go at very low times, like, like 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, right? Because I would have $36 and I would have to do math in my head. And I would just pray that no employee would say hello to me to throw my math off, right?
mm.
That's why I would go when there wasn't a lot of people there, because I just didn't want to get to that register and not have enough money yet, because I had never had to
It
deal with
was like
that
a
before.
pride thing too. So it's
Right.
not only were you like, I couldn't pay, can't pay your rent or your mortgage. You're also like, I can't put food on the table. Like, and
No,
then you're stuck between like, do I help pay for mom's care or do I
no, it was
like,
never a question of do I pay for mom's care. No, it was
yeah,
always her care came first. She came first. If I showered, depended on her. If I where I slept to how I slept, how often I slept depended on her. What I ate, what I could buy, where I could go, how, what jobs I had. Like everything depended on her.
mhm.
She had to come first. And I didn't have a choice in that. I mean, that's not true. I had a choice at any
You
given
didn't
time.
feel like you had a choice.
Yeah, any
Yeah.
caregiver, there is no legal binding contract unless you're a parent and the person is under 18 years old. There's no legal binding contract that says you have to be like a caregiver, right?
Yeah.
And especially like in my situation, like I love my mom. Caregiving was wonderful, but my mom was my abuser, growing up, so there's definitely nothing that says that you have to be, a caregiver for somebody who was abusive to you, whether it be a parent or a
Right.
spouse or anything.
Not, I mean, you bring up a good point. It's like not everybody is nice to take care of, and you've
Mm-mm.
got this history. Did
Right.
that get resolved as you were caregiving? Did you kind of come to a place?
Not well, I had done a lot of therapy before mom had her stroke. And I had learned how to have a lot of boundaries with her.
Mhm.
But again, before her stroke, I was able to say, like, "Mom, if you do this, I will do this." You know what I mean? And that worked really well. Well, once she had her stroke, I could not do that, right? And and so then I was thrown back into um a lot of the mental and emotional abuse. Obviously there wasn't any physical abuse anymore, but the mental and emotional abuse was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. And honestly, she was nicer when she was sick.
I
You
mean,
know,
that
she was,
happens. It
yeah, she
happens
was
a
nicer.
lot, actually.
Yeah, the days that she was lucid, were the days that she was just
You're like, who is
mean.
this person? And
Yeah, she was
sometimes,
just,
and
and
mm,
so there I was, like, trapped in that abuse again, like all of these years that I'd worked through. I'd worked really, really diligently to, regardless of if my mom was a good mom, I wanted to be a good daughter. I'd gone through, like, forgiving her as a woman, then forgiving her as a mom, and letting go of that she wasn't the mom that was on TV. She was just the mom that was chosen for me. And this is our journey and all that other stuff. And so and it was very difficult, but what I had to learn, what it forced me to do, was to learn how to set boundaries for myself, because every caregiver out there, I know you've all heard this, like, we've all heard this, like, you just need to set boundaries. It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you
So that's my
cannot
next question is like, what does it really look like for you, Christina? Like,
r-
give us some examples.
right, like, you can't set boundaries with somebody who has cognitive issues, right?
Yeah,
And
no,
it's like for me, the boundaries I had to have, like, I had to have some of those boundaries around my codependency with her. You know what I mean? Like, if she kicked me out, rather than sitting, out in my car crying out front of her house, right? I had to be like, okay, Christina, she has a God. You need to go home. She has cameras. You can check on her. You need to go home and do some self-care, or you need to relax, or you need to do whatever, right? You I had to do those type of things rather than the stuff that I wanted to do, right? If
right,
she was if she was I had to let go of trying to be like, "Mom, when you say that, that hurts me." You know what I mean? Because I wasn't gonna get those results that I wanted. Like, that was my boundary, was, do not try to have that conversation, because it was kind of like me, who does not speak Chinese, speaking to somebody who only speaks Chinese, and
mm,
expecting us to be able to have a rational conversation. Like, we're just not, right?
right.
And so my boundary was like, do not try to engage in that. I had to say, do not try to engage in that, because it was only going to frustrate her, frustrate me, and also, with that abuse, how she was before was, the second she saw that it got to me, it was a green light for her.
Oh yeah, they know those
It's
Achilles heel. Yeah,
right, exactly. So at that, because I knew that, I it was no longer her abusing me if I allowed it to go on without having those boundaries with myself. Like, I was the one who was hurting myself, right?
hmm.
And so yeah, so I had to do that a lot, and I knew, like, if I had been in a situation where she was, really, really abusive one day, I really had to rearrange my schedule to make some more time for rest or self-care or whatever, that may be, right? Or
To kind
crying.
of
Yeah,
counterbalance.
exactly. I make some time for crying,
Very
whatever.
intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And or find a way to get another. If I could ask a caregiver, can you work some extra hours, or I'm supposed to work tomorrow, can you work tomorrow, just to give her a break. And I sometimes she would forget why she was angry at me if I had a couple days that I didn't work, so but
Where do
there were
you,
some
if you're
beautiful
not getting
times.
the validation, like you're in deep with somebody in a caregiving situation like that, and you're not getting the validation from them, like where did you get your validation during that time?
Oh God. I literally I didn't. I mean, I didn't. It was me. And I mean, of course, people always say, "Man, you're such a good daughter," and da 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 da. And it's like, you don't feel like that when you're a caregiver. I mean, I don't know about you, but my caregiver journey, I did feel like I was constantly failing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then we also there's so many times we have to let go of normal. Like, we had to let go of normal in self-care, right? We also had to let go of normal in what our life is, right? Like, my life was, I was financially abundant, I was healthy, I had a great social life. And then when I was trying to, like, compare myself to that as a caregiver, I felt like I was failing, right? So I also had to like let go of that normal as well, right? And when I started doing a lot of those things, that's when I was able to start really making some amazing changes for myself, and
Yeah, talk about those.
yeah, I got that $15 an hour job. It gave me something more than that $100,000 a year job. It was a sales and marketing manager job for $15 an hour, right? And my job was to go around town in a town that I thought there was no resources. Now, many caregivers out there think there's no resources in their own town. And I have asked hundreds of family caregivers that are in the industry. When did you start finding resources? And you know what they say? Once I started working in the industry, and it shouldn't be like that, right? You know
No.
what I mean?
As
It's
I
hard
say,
for
once I knew I was a caregiver, I knew what to at least Google. Like I
right,
didn't,
exactly.
yeah,
A lot of us didn't even know what terms
no,
to. And so again, I didn't even know there was such thing called a caregiver, right?
exactly.
So my job was to go around and build referral partnerships with all these people in the senior and retirement industry. And then I was like just blown away at how many resources there was in my town. And so I started asking these people, hey, do you want to, come, if I get a group of people together, do you want to come and lecture on what you do, to caregivers? So I would bring people together, and we were doing like 4 to 6 classes a month on all these different topics. And then I said, hey, is there a senior fair here every year? And they're like, well, there used to be. I'm like, well, there is now, but it's a senior and caregiver fair. So I organized an annual senior and caregiver fair, and with a lot of educational components. And then I got together with some of the people that I had been, doing some of the stuff with. And I said, we have all these resources in town. I mean, there was well over 100, and from nothing. That's literally why, one of the reasons why I almost died, because I thought there was no resources, right?
Right.
And there's hundreds, 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 right?
You were thirsty for them.
Right.
You
Oh
just couldn't
yeah. Oh
find
yeah.
the where to get
Yeah,
them.
exactly. And it changed how I was able to care for my mom too, And so
Hmm.
I said, why don't we start a nonprofit? What do you think about that? I had never started a nonprofit before, and so I started a nonprofit. I was one of the founders of Loving Them Forward and the president, and it was a hyper local nonprofit, and it was a collective of all these different resources. We also had a hotline, and we also did some great events. We did a great thing called Caregiver Christmas, which that was pretty fun. I had it was November, the first Wednesday of November, and I had a massive caregiver headache, right? Massive caregiver headache thinking about Christmas, right? Because any caregiver who goes through the holidays knows
Yeah.
it's pretty stressful, right?
We were
And
already stressed. We're already
right,
stressed.
exactly. And so I was thinking about how there's going to be not presents. Mom's going to ask why there isn't presents. I was thinking about the family and what excuses they're going to give and how I have to explain that to mom and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if we could have like a Christmas just for caregivers where we give them gifts? And then I was like, dang it, COVID. And then I had a board meeting that day, and I said to the board, what do you think about doing a drive-through caregiver Christmas? And I don't know, they were crazy enough to agree, right? And so in less than a month, we got together enough to give away 300 gift bags. This is the first year. And, that went for like 3 years. And by the third year, we were giving away like 1,200 gift bags. We had to move to the fairgrounds. People
Wow.
would come through, these caregivers would come through, and as they came through would be waving like Merry Caregiver Christmas and we appreciate you. And they would literally be like, by the time they got to get their gift bag, they would be crying, and it wasn't even about what was in the bag. It was about, it had been so long since there was something just for them. It had been so long since somebody said, we see you, we
Yes.
hear you, and we appreciate you. And I love that, because for me, like, I just like,
You're almost
it
making
was
me
the best.
cry, Christina.
Yeah, it was.
But the thing is this can be reproduced. Like we need
Oh
more
yeah.
of these types of things, whether
Oh
they're
yeah.
caregiver appreciation luncheons or expos, or like
Oh yeah.
people who are listening that have the capacity and the resources to make these things happen. Like do something
Well,
because
and
they're desperate to be seen and validated.
Well, and that's, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's one of the things that, I do now, as a consultant with
Yes.
my
Yeah,
business. But
tell us more
so,
about, yeah.
okay. So that happened. And then, the nonprofit got some national recognition because it won awards, it won awards for being,
Great.
and not because I'm so great or the nonprofit was so great, but just because the need was so great, right? And
Mhm.
then, I started doing some speaking nationally and some advocacy work, and then, a national company approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to duplicate that, program all across the United States?" I said, "Yes, please. Thank you very much." I said, "The only caveat is, I won't hire salespeople in these cities. I want to hire contract workers and, to be the eyes and ears of the cities. And they have to be current or former family members, just like I was. And they
Family
can be,
caregivers,
yeah,
yes.
exactly. And so,
And you wanna pay them.
yeah, exactly. And so, that was what, we did, and I created a program called Champions, and you were one of the champions, and,
For Atlanta,
uh,
yep.
yeah, exactly. And, the eyes and the ears of the city, and I was able to go around and build communities in these cities, right? And then, I do a lot of advocacy work, a lot of speaking, a lot of press and media and consulting work, and that work was ramping up along the side of all of this, right? And so, in April, I actually had, that demand was so great, I actually launched my own company, and it's Keys for Caregiving.
What
And
a
it
great
was,
name, first
yeah,
of all. Can we
well,
just
Christina Keys, thank you to my parents, but, you know, um,
yes.
it, it was, something me and my mom had talked about. You know, she wanted me to do that, right? And also, when my mother died December 28th of 22, I said, Christina, you're going to take a year to, do what you need to do, and then January of 2024, you're going to really start working on that. And it just so happened that it came to, really came to fruition in April. And, so now with my business, obviously I'm still speaking, all over, doing advocacy work, but that's one of the things I do too is, there are a couple people I do some coaching with, right? I limit it to 10 people, but I'll always take a call from a caregiver, right? I have a text line, and, but, I do consulting with businesses, on how to create these events, project management on these events, how to market
Amazing.
to family caregivers, how to reach more family caregivers, how to really engage those family caregivers, because I feel like, um, a lot of times companies have really great intentions, and they know how to market to like seniors, but they are, folks with special needs, but really not the caregivers.
Yeah.
We're still so invisible, and, there's a way to reach us, and so,
We're out there.
right,
53 million plus in the US alone. I think it's a low number, by the way,
right.
but yes.
Right. It used to drive me crazy when I'd say to people like, "Oh, do you work with caregivers?" And they'd be like, "Oh, no, mainly seniors." I'm like, "Oh, so like healthy seniors who are playing tennis and vacationing?" They'd be like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, who's bringing them to the appointments?" "Well, usually family member." And, "Well, who's signing the documents and paying you?" It's
Yeah.
usually
Who's
family
buying the
member.
prescriptions
Yeah,
and yeah.
exactly. It's like, "Oh, so you work with caregiver?" "Well, no, again, mainly seniors." Like, "You're out." It's like, I'm just like,
You
I
don't
can't.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let me educate you, right? And,
Mhm.
even one time a gerontologist that I was talking to, no, I just work with seniors. Who- you cannot work with seniors, and not know about working with family caregivers either.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I get to do now, and I love it. You know what I mean? So I love what I get to do now, and it
Amazing.
really, it changed my life being a family caregiver. Like, I've had a lot of fancy titles. I've had a lot of fancy titles. I've been, a director. I'm now a CEO. I've been a founder. I've been a president. I've been all of these things. So I was a manager by the time I was 18, right? I was a national trainer by the time I was 25, right? But of all of these fancy titles I've had, like, literally the one I'm most proud of is family caregiver, because it
Oh,
changed my life. It changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to, that relationship I had with my mother, to really get the most beauty out of it that I could, the most love out of it that I could, and find out really who Christina Keys could be. You know what I mean? And my mom regardless of, how she mommed, right? My mom was kind of, I don't know if I can say this, but she was kind of a badass. You know what I mean? She was amazing, right? She had one of the highest security clearances in aerospace on the military side. She was, and she worked up from that, from Rosie the Riveter, you know what I mean? And she was a single mom for many years. And she was really like, she had her own things that she
Yeah.
went through in her
Well,
life.
you
And
are a
and
badass,
yeah,
Christina.
well, I got that
You
trait from
are.
my
Say thank
mom.
you.
But
Thank
thank you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. But yeah, so I learned a whole different level of who, I could be. And I wouldn't have been able to do that, without caregiving and that whole different level of love. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it is a whole different level of love when
Oh
you're,
yeah, this is what
yeah,
love looks like when you're like
right,
hands deep in places you don't want to go, and
right,
you're, you know, waking up in
right,
the morning and running errands and taking people to places that would rather be in bed and rather be doing lots of fun. Yeah, this is what
right.
love looks like. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think what I appreciate too that you bring it up is that, a lot of times I think people think, oh, caregiving, like it's heavy. It is heavy.
Yeah, right.
And yet there are a lot of sparkly, amazing
Oh, yeah.
things that
Oh, yeah.
many, many things that, and if you don't believe that, then you've got to hang out with the right kind of caregivers, like as way I look at it. Like you can go hang out with the Eeyore caregivers, I call
Right,
them, like, and they're just like whine and complain, and like you're gonna like go down into this deep dark hole. Or you can
yeah,
find the people who are like, okay, this really sucks, and talk for a minute about sex. It's like, okay, now how can, like how do I get it? How do I help me,
right, right. Well, and like me and mom had like a lot of beautiful. I remember one time, like there's this one time we used to call them Team Mom moments, right? Where it was me and her against the world, me and her against the doctors, me and her against her stroke, right? And there was this one time when she lived in a house in Seattle, she wanted to go upstairs. Well, no PT or OT person was going to do that, facilitate that, or teach anybody how to do it. Just wasn't safe, right? So one day she's crying and she wants to go upstairs, right? And I was like, Ma, you want to go upstairs? We're going upstairs. And so I said to the caregiver, I said, can you bring a chair up there? And I said, it might be a while before we get up there, so you can sit and wait, right? And so I take mom and I sit on one stair and I sit her, and she's paralyzed on the right side between my legs in front of me. And I scooched up one and then I pulled her up one. And it must have taken us 45 minutes to get up
Mm.
those stairs. But we got up to the top of those stairs and we just rocked back and forth and cried in each other's arms.
Oh.
And it was beautiful. And it was this beautiful team mom moment. And it's like, I
Mm.
can't, I mean, that was a priceless moment, right? And there were so many of those. There were so many of those. And even through the hospice process, when mom was passing, I remember she said, Tina, I had waited all my life for her to say she was sorry for some of the things she had done. And she
Yes.
said, Tina, I need to tell you I'm sorry. And, out of respect, I let her, but then I stopped her and I said, Mom, I said, look, I forgave you a long time ago. I forgave you a long time ago. How do you think I was able to be your caregiver? And I said, we're good, Mom. We are good. And, I want you to be at peace with that, and she was able to go in peace,
Mm.
and there were and we were, she made a video for me before she passed that I can listen to like
Aw.
anytime I'm sad. Like, there were so many beautiful, beautiful moments in caregiving that, man, I'm so grateful I got to have that. It was the most traumatic experience of my life, but it was the most
Yes.
beautiful. And I tell people all the time, look, if somebody offered me a million times, like you can do this again and again and again, but they told me I was going to forget everything and it was going to be just as hard and you'd struggle just as much, I'd still sign up every flipping time, because of how many beautiful moments there were and how much I learned about myself and love and mom, and it was
And the people that we've met through this, I think are,
oh my God. I
I
love
wouldn't,
family
yes.
caregivers. I gotta tell you, like, even like with the champions program, like I led like what was it, 110 people, and I work with all of these people, and it's like, but those people are like my heroes. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you and all those other people, it's like I'm still like I still fangirl out on people like you and, Aisha Atkins and like Teresa Wilbanks and like, there are so Brandon Will and Patty LaFleur and you guys are also my friends too. Like there's a part of me that like we're peers, we're friends, but
Yes.
I'm like a fangirl out on you guys. Susan
Aw.
Singer Carter, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh
Well,
my
you're
God, they're
mentioning
so amazing.
a lot
Yeah.
of prior podcast guests, so I'll be sure to link to some of those episodes too in the that we've had. We've had Patty, Aisha, Teresa, Susie on the show. So like you love this episode with Christina, you're gonna love meeting all these other folks because
Yeah.
it's like it's pretty spectacular. Like it's a yeah, proud to be a part of all of that stuff. So
Well, and
uh,
I tell caregivers all the time when they're doubting themselves, because I have a lot of caregivers all across the United States when I would travel. I didn't care if I met a caregiver, I would give them my personal phone number. I did not care, right? And when they would have a bad day, they would call me and I'd say, Sally Sue, caregiver, I'd say, listen, if you met somebody today and they came up to you and they told you the story of their life and they explained your life, right? And what you've been through and what you've gone through and how you made it through it, you'd probably look at them and be like, oh my God, you're incredible. I could
yeah,
never do that. And it's like, but that's you. You are
yes.
amazing. And I love reminding caregivers like, you're a badass, you're amazing. You are stronger than you know.
You
And
are
it's
feature film worthy. Like
right,
take any
exactly.
caregiver story
Right.
and like feature film worthy of
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So
aw.
yes.
Well, what I mean, I we could talk all day, Christina,
Yeah.
but we got to keep this to
Yeah.
the time
Right.
limit too. But like what do you want people to take away from this? Like what what how do people stay in touch with you? Oh wait, we can't do that yet. I gotta at least get a question or two out of the
Okay,
journal.
let's get a question out of the
Okay.
journal and then I'll let them know how to
Okay.
contact me.
Let's say, okay, if you could take a whole day off right now, what would you do? How would you
Oh
spend
my
it?
God, I would go straight to the beach. I would just go straight to the beach and just sit by the water and I'd probably sit by the water, do a little bit of crying, do a little bit of breathing, do a little bit of journaling, and then repeat
Yes.
for like 8 hours. Like just bring a lawn chair. Just like even like the Oregon coast too. Like I live in Washington, so I'd bring a hoodie and I'd sit there in my combat boots and my hoodie and
So you're not even
cry.
getting a tan. You're just there
No,
for
no,
the
I'm just
salt and sea
breathing my
effect.
butt off. I'm listening and watching the ocean, crying, journaling, breathing, repeat.
Love it. What's something you're really good at?
Oh man, multitasking and being optimistic. I'm really good at believing that anything is flipping possible. You tell me something not is not possible and it's like let me put that on my list of things to do today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've lived it, like your story. Like again, like you're a badass. You went from this, now you're this. Not only are you this, but you're like, hey, come aboard my train. We're
Yeah.
all gonna go. We're
Oh
all
yeah.
getting there.
I don't win
Um,
unless we all win.
yeah.
You know what I mean? That's when at the end of the day, at the end of my life, like at the end of my life, like I just want us all to be like standing side by side. And if I had a win in my career, it would be me standing in the middle and 75 of us, 7,500 of us on each side, and we're all standing there equals, and we've all used our voice to make that change, right? And all the people who are just starting, all of us have taught them how to raise their voice, and help with that change. And then I would feel like I won. If we were all equal and we all stood together, then I would feel like we won. We would make that difference,
I
right?
think, I think you're closer than you think. Like if you had a map and like a pinpoint for every
Yeah.
person whose life you've impacted, like it's it's pretty much solid color there, Christina. So
Yeah.
like, and you've got a lot left to a lot of energy and ideas to contribute. How do people stay in touch with you?
Well, I have a really awesome community text line that people can text me on.
Okay,
First of all,
let's hear it.
it's 360-230-7736. And anybody in the United States can text me at again 360-230-7736. You can also reach me at my website. It's just ChristinaKeys.com. And
Okay.
all my socials are listed there. Keys for Caregiving is mainly the social handle on, TikTok, Insta, Facebook, LinkedIn is, Christina Keys or Keys for Caregiving.
Super easy to
So
remember. It's super easy to
yeah.
remember. Keys for Caregiving, ChristinaKeys.com. And I love the community text. Like people can text you a question, like
Oh
anything
yeah,
goes.
whatever. If you're in I don't know, Michigan, and you're like, I don't know, I need to find a adult day center. Just text me. And the thing about, I might not know, you know what I mean? I do remember a lot of them,
But
but
you know
I
many
might not know, but I
champions.
know people, I know champions, I know people, and I will find out. I will find out for you. So, or you know what? If you're just like, can you just remind me that I'm a badass? I will be the one to
Yeah.
remind you that you are beautiful and you are loved and you are worthy. So you are appreciated.
Right back at you, Christina.
Mhm.
So lovely to have you in my life. I'm just grateful.
I'm grateful too. I'm grateful for you, sister. I'm grateful for you, my friend.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.